Hello, I'm Antoinette James, reporter in He-Waka-Putanga jurisdiction. I welcome you to Behind the Beehive, where I look behind the corporation political show and try and reveal the truth. And today's truth is still about King Charles III's coronation, and the last of a 5-part series. We're looking at the gold state carriage. And really, this is like the enormous full stop on all the esoteric nature of this whole performance, this whole show, this esoteric Mithraism, ancient mystery religion, sun worship, Luciferian belief system of the elite with just a very thin Protestant Christian veneer over it, so that we still think, oh, aren't we great, where the West is still basically Protestant Christian, but I think we're a long way from that now. So we're going to be looking at Camilla and Charles, the carriage they rode in. We've just had this great pomp and this ceremony, it really steeped in Roman Catholicism, which we know esoterically is Mithraism, is ancient mystery religion. From the altar to the cross of Wales to the King's stole to the to now the carriage that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to look at a quote first. I'm going to read a quote. It's going to be a lot of quotes today, so you get to understand this isn't my opinion. This is history. We're revealing the truth. This is a concession of England to the Pope, 1213. This is England sold out. Let's read this. We will and establish perpetual obligation and concession. We will establish that from the proper and special revenues of our aforesaid kingdoms for all the service and customs which we ought to render to them. Okay, that's to the British Isles. Saving in all things the penny of St. Peter. We now know from previous videos in this series that that is esoterically Jupiter, the highest god that the esoteric insiders of the Roman Catholic papacy worship. Saving in all things the penny of St. Peter. The Roman Church, because that's what it was known way back then, the Roman Church shall receive yearly 1,000 marks sterling. So remember, this is 1213, so dread to think what the poor people of Great Britain are paying to the papacy every year. Namely, at the Feast of St. Michael, 500 marks, and at Easter, 500 marks, 700, namely for the Kingdom of England, and 300 for the Kingdom of Ireland. So we're seeing here that they are vassals of the Vatican. The Pope considers that Britain can get about its business if it pays rent to the Pope to do so. Okay, here's a quote from Paolo Sarpi. He was very much instrumental with the Jesuit order, because the Jesuits were created as the Counter-Reformation military order to spend every effort they have crushing the Reformation that Martin Luther had just won with We the People. Couldn't have been done without us. So he was a Venetian elite. If you get my book, Are Revolting, I delve a deep dive into all this so you can see how it happened. The Jesuits just didn't appear from a thought. So here we go. This is Sarpi. He said this. He lived in the 1500s. He died in 1623. Every species of vice finds patronage in them. Jesuits. There is no perjury, no sacrilege, nor principle, nor incest, nor rapine, nor fraud, nor treason that cannot be masked screens? Is that I'm asking? Could be. As meritorious beneath the mantle of their dispensation. All trickery. Let's go on to another quote. Now, this is a quote by Tamburini. He was the 14th Superior General of the Jesuits, and he said this in 1720. See, sir, from this chamber I govern not only to Paris, but to China. Not only to China, but to all the world, without anyone knowing how 'tis managed. The Vatican funded Guy Fawkes here in the UK with the gunpowder plot of 1605. It was aimed to blow up the Houses of Parliament because the King James Bible, the 1611 King James Bible, was being ratified through the House. So the instigator of the gunpowder plot was a Roman Catholic Jesuit known by Henry Garnett. He was executed for the plot, and we know more commonly and more infamously Guy Fawkes, who also, I think he died when they got him. They ran to one of the elites' mansions, estates to hide out, but they were chased down, and some of them were shot, and Garnett was executed for his part in that. This is what Garnett said before he was executed. "O God, destroy this perfidious nation." So his god is Osiris because it's sun worship. He hated Britain, although he was British himself, but he was Roman Catholic. And that's the thing with the elites. They don't have an allegiance to a country. They have allegiance to the Pope as king and monarch of the whole world. Extirpate from the earth those who live in it, to the end that we may joyfully enter into Jesus Christ the Pope, because he's Osiris in this world. Jesus Christ is Tammuz, remember that thin Christian veil. Enter into Jesus Christ the Pope, the praises that are due unto him. So it's all about getting rid of Christianity out of any Protestant nation. Here's what Pope Clement said, because he suppressed the Jesuit order. He wasn't the first Pope to banish the order, but he successfully did it. He knew they were going to get him. He was so fearful, he did it at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It had already been banished from and continued to be banished from over 80 countries around the world. Japan, so fearful of the Jesuits, they wouldn't allow a European onto their soil for over 150 years. So this is what Pope Clement, the 14th, said. The suppression of the Jesuit order is accomplished. I do not repent of it, having only resolved on it after examining and weighing everything, and because I thought it necessary for the Church, that's the Roman Catholic Church. If it were not done, I would do it now. But this suppression will be my death. And it was his death. He actually died a very slow and very ugly death. So what did Napoleon say on his deathbed? He said of the Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is a general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery. The aim of this organization is power in its most despotic exercise, absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man. And he was talking about the Pope. So he was very clear exactly who was pulling the strings, and no one knew how it was managed. Here's a quote that we have from Cardinal Henry Manning in 1892. He was the Archbishop of Winchester then. And this, he says, the right of deposing kings is inherent in the supreme sovereignty which the popes, as vice-regents of Christ, exercise over all Christian nations. Here's another quote. Adolf Hitler. What did he have to say about the Jesuits? I have learnt most of all from the Jesuit order. So far, there has been nothing more imposing on earth than the hierarchical organization of the Catholic Church, because you can't separate the Jesuits from the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the papacy. A good part of that organization, Hitler says, I have transported direct to my own party. That's the Nazi party. The Catholic Church must be held up as an example. I will tell you a secret. I am founding an order, that's the Nazi SS. In Himmler, I see our Ignatius de Loyola. And Ignatius de Loyola, he was the first Jesuit general that the Sapi and his Venetians put into power, because the Venetians and the Roman Catholic papacy were at odds. All the wars during the centuries were between those two. We had the papacy with St. Peter's Square. We had the Venetian oligarchy with St. Mark's Square. So they're always at odds. The papacy had the dragon as their emblem. The Venetians had the winged lion as their emblem. And all the wars were between those two, including the 7-year war that we see represented in the Golden State carriage that Charles and Camilla went back to the palace in. What does HuffPost of the US say in 2015? But shrewdly, methodically, and with showman flair, the soft-spoken 78-year-old Argentinian Jesuit priest named Jorge Mario Bergoglio, that's Pope Francis, our first Jesuit Pope that's in office now, the article went on, showed Thursday that he is running to become president of the planet. Sure is. He's right there in the UN. In fact, that is the shopfront of all globalism now. If the Vatican came, we would say, no, we've been here in history before. No. So they've started their new organization, the United Nations. The article goes on, he did so in congressional ceremony of secular civic pomp in a massive legislative building that, after all, harks back to ancient Rome, fasci, and we're going to be talking about that. We see that in the carriage, so this is why I'm sharing this quote. As devoted as he is, as devoted as Francis is, as focused on the faith, his faith, sun worship faith, and practice of the Catholic Church, Francis is also campaigning to lead public secular political discourse worldwide. This is uniting church and state. This is bringing in a one world order with a one world religion. He is arguing that the two realms of faith and politics, that's Catholic Church and state, are one. So he's already saying it, because you've got to start with the rhetoric first. And that the moral and spiritual teaching of faith, that's one world religion, should inform and guide political decisions of our common home. And when the King James Bible was published in 1611, it had a warning in the front of it, from the nobles to the king, thanking him, that was James, thanking him for allowing this publication. That's why it's the King James Bible, and reminding him that we had to be wary and vigilant of the man of sin, as will not be healed. The quote says, writing in defense of the truth, this is it used to be in the inside of the King James Bible, you won't find it there now, which has given such a blow unto that man of sin, that's the Pope, as will not be healed. Well, it's up to you and I to make sure it will not be healed, because he's sure trying through the UN to have it healed. Again, this is why I was quite shocked that Charles actually swore his oath on this Bible. What does the Bible say, particularly in Revelations, the King James Version, if you want to get the correct order of it? It says, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666." Revelations chapter 13, verse 18. In Russ Miner's publication, What the Church Has Hidden From Us, page 42, he says, an unknown historian once said, the entire European continent and New World, that's America, and through into the West, would be Mithraic today. There's the religion of Mithraism, sun worship, if Christianity hadn't come along, because that's what was there before Christianity. Other historians have put it this way: Christianity didn't conquer Mithraism, paganism. Mithraism, Roman Catholicism, blended in and changed names. Yes, it did. It was Romanism. It was pagan Rome, now papal Rome, Mithraism. The name Passover was changed to Easter by political stroke of the pen at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. That's the Roman Catholic Council. So how does this bring us into the coach? Well, the coach was given as a present by Samuel Butler in 1762 to King George III. He was a total Jesuit tool. So I just want to read, as we move forward, looking at this carriage a little bit more, what Graham Lowry, he's a historian and author, American historian, says about what happened with the takeover of Britain. Quote, in December 1688, the armies of the Dutch, that was a 25,000 strong army, Prince William of Orange invaded England, interrupting the Hobbesian nightmare of the country had experienced under the deranged King Charles I and his brother James II. A worse nightmare was to follow when William seized the throne of James II, for he embodied a more highly distilled form of poison, which Venice, Sarpi, the Jesuits, which Venice had perfected during its sway over the remains of the Dutch Republic. This outright usurpation is blithely referred to in British Venetian parlance as the Glorious Revolution. Far from it. That's what we're told, us peasants are told in history. He goes on, which should give you some idea of how little regard for the truth prevails in these circles. That's the circles of the elite, the movers and shakers that rule over us today, that are trying to take away our inalienable rights under God. There's another historian, Gerald Rose, in a speech that I have listened to of his, and I've got the transcript, The Venetian Takeover of England, a 200-year project, which he presented in the US President's Day in 1994. Let me quote this. It was one of the most well-known secrets of British oligarchy that the model for the British Empire was Venice. Benjamin Disraeli, the late 19th century Prime Minister of England, let the cat out of the bag in his novel Coningsby when he wrote the great object of Whig leadership in England from the first movement under Hampden to the last most successful one in 1688. The first movement 1688 was to establish in England a high aristocratic republic in the model of the Venetian. The Whig party is the Venetians. Gerald's quote goes on, William III told Whig leaders, I will not be a doge. They brought in a new family on their own terms. George I was a doge, George II was a doge. George III tried not to be a doge because he was tied up with those Jesuits. He might try to get rid of the Whig magnificos, but he could not get rid himself of the Venetian constitution. The well-known secret of all Whig insiders was that the Venetian takeover of England was a 200-year project, beginning with the break of Henry VIII with Rome, including 1714, with the ascension to the throne of George I. The English parliamentary system of government was modelled explicitly on the Venetian system of a great assembly and senate that controls the doge. England officially in 1688 became an oligarchy. This formality was merely the tip of the iceberg. Any doge, any king is elected, comes under what effectively is a Jesuit-controlled establishment. Here's another quote. This is actually from my book, We Are Revolting, page 498. King George III declared himself subservient to Shelburne, lead British East India Company, which became the shadow government, originally run out of the company office to later be run from the British Secret Service intelligence. A Venetian faction did the same in the USA after World War II, creating the CIA and the FBI as the shadow government driving their own agendas. And I think we saw that very clearly during the Trump administration. He couldn't turn around. The CIA is basically Hitler's SS, and the FBI is still the Spanish Inquisition. So let's get on to the carriage. We know the name of the sculptor that did all this fancy work, this beautiful fancy work. His name was William Wilton, and he was an English sculptor, but he had spent quite a bit of time in Rome and in Florence, and he was a founding member of the Royal Academy. Anytime you hear Royal Academy, Royal Society of, you know this is the Venetians, you know this is the Fabians, you know this is the elite. You do not get there if you're just someone pleasantly getting about your business. You are an insider. He has got a lot of works in Westminster Abbey, so he's clearly the man of the moment. And when he was in Florence, he met Giovanni Battista Cipriani, the painter on this Gold State carriage. You'll notice on the doors, beautiful paintings. We'll get to him in a minute. When he returned from Florence to England, Cipriani went with him. In 1793, he declared himself bankrupt, but that didn't stop anything because he was an elite, so everything just carried on. He was the keeper of the Royal Academy until his death in 1803. So what we see on the carriage is three cherubs. They're holding that crown there, and that's talking about Ireland, England, and Scotland. You'll see on the carriage there, each corner, there is a tree. It's decorated with symbols. They are symbols of the victories of the 7 Years' War. So we know that's between the Vatican and the Venetians. And the Venetians did hobble the Vatican. That's the Jesuit order. The Venetians won the day. And now we have the Venetians and the Romans, pagan Rome, now papal Rome, glued together, never to be parted. There are lions' heads there. Could be Britain, because we know in scripture Britain is the lion. Could be also Venice or Venetians, because they're doing a little bit of copycat there. We see conch shells. That is the emblem, the symbol of Jupiter. Also on this coach you have snake-like wreaths winding around the trees and winding through everywhere. The ribbon, the symbol of a snake. You see Poseidon's, I believe to be Poseidon's face on the side with shell, because that is his symbol. He is Jupiter. On the four corners we have the sons of Poseidon and Aphrodite, and they are known for their violence. In the front of the carriage they're blowing their conch shells, which is a way of saying, you know, here come the storms, here comes the violence, here comes the earthquakes. The conch shell also is known as the cornucopia in a lot of ancient Baroque and Renaissance art, and that is an ancient mystery sign of plenty and sexual debauchery. The shells are very much part of Darwin, and particularly his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. And his coat of arms was 3 scallop shells, so, you know, Jupiter or Venus. And he had in Latin written, and this is his motto, everything from shells. That's the basis of evolution. We see that in the Vatican in their coat of arms. There's the Coptic shell, as it's known, with those 2 keys. Right, so let's have a look at these tritons. They're blowing their conch shells. They're known as the monarchs of the ocean. And to me, this talks about maritime admiralty law and the law of the sea from 1666 that came over the land, and talks about our birth certificate and our straw man. We are living a fiction. So we see gilded dolphins there. They too have the scallop shell. Now the 2 tridents in the back, they're carrying what's known as fasciae. That means that the people inside that carriage have no power unless it's been invested by a higher power. Fasciae were pagan Rome brought into papal Rome. We see that all over the place. Mussolini, that famous photograph of him talking out on his balcony, 2 fasciae, because he only had his power that was given to him by the Vatican. He was the Jesuit man put in, and part of his deal is we put you in power and you give us back Vatican City, because at that stage Vatican City was owned by Italy. It's not now, it's a private state. Anyone who understood ancient mystery religion would see these tridents in the front declaring, touch us, touch the people in this carriage that have been put there by the Pope, and you're in for it. The carriage that he went to Westminster Abbey just had all the British symbols and mottos on them, because it didn't really much matter. But going back, watch out, you're owned by the Vatican. Let me read this quote. For today, Rome considers the fascist regime the nearest to its dogmas and interest. We have not merely the Reverend Jesuit Father Colin praising Mussolini's Italy as a Christian democracy, Roman Catholic, but Civiltà Catholica, house organ of the Jesuits, says quite frankly, so the Jesuits themselves say, quote, fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome. So let's just quickly finish now by looking at Cipriani, the artist, and his beautiful, actually, paintings on the side of the golden state carriage. What state? I would say Vatican state, not the British state. So he's the painter. Considering all the ancient mystery, all the mythology, Roman, Greek mythology that connects and dovetails, that's just dripping all over that carriage. The paintings are mythology as well, because that's what this painter, this is what Giovanni, this is his first name, this is what Giovanni painted. He did fiction, he did allegories. This was his his form of art. I know a little bit about mythology. I'm trying to learn more about that so I can identify what's going on. Again, it will have esoteric signaling to those in the know. It will just establish what this monarchy is all about. He did the ceiling in Buckingham Palace. He did other works at Windsor. He sorted out Rubens' ceiling in the banqueting house in Whitehall. So again, an insider. The throne is going nowhere. We see it is the throne of David. In the Bible, it's very clear. It was an unconditional throne. God didn't want Israel to have a throne, but they got it. First with Saul, then with David. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Bless you now.